Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've wrapped up our first 12 episodes and now we're kicking off a brand new season.
That's right. Season 2 is here. Over the next 12 episodes, we're diving into some of the most important issues shaping life sciences today.
We'll be covering everything from the FDA's digital health future to biosimilars, clinical trial diversity, sustainability, and even the next wave of biomanufacturing resilience.
And of course, today's conversation is all about artificial intelligence and pharmacovigilance, how AI is changing the way we monitor drug safety, and how we can do it without losing trust.
This season is about asking tough questions, finding balance between innovation and responsibility, and exploring the strategies that will define the next chapter of life sciences.
So let's dive in. Season 2 of The Deep Dive starts now.
Pharmacovigilance has always been about one thing: protecting patients. Whether it's detecting adverse drug reactions, monitoring long term safety, or making sure medicines stay effective, it's a discipline built on vigilance and accuracy. But the challenge is scale. Modern healthcare generates an ocean of safety data: spontaneous adverse event reports, electronic health records, social media mentions, wearable data, claims databases, even patient reported outcomes. Sorting through all of that using traditional manual methods is overwhelming.
That's where AI is stepping in. Machine learning algorithms can process thousands, even millions of safety reports in a fraction of the time it would take a human team. Natural language processing can sift through unstructured text, pulling out relevant information from physician notes, call center transcripts, or social media chatter. Pattern recognition can identify potential safety signals earlier by spotting correlations that might have gone unnoticed in manual reviews.
And that speed matters. If an adverse event is detected days or weeks earlier, regulators and companies can take action faster, issuing warnings, updating labels, or in extreme cases, pulling a product from the market. Faster signal detection can literally save lives.
But here's the tension: AI may be powerful, but safety is about trust. Regulators don't want a black box algorithm deciding whether a signal is real or not. They want transparency. How was the data cleaned? What model was used? What thresholds triggered the signal? And how can we be confident that bias didn't distort the output?
And let's not forget, the stakes are different here than in other industries. If an e-commerce recommendation algorithm makes a mistake, the consequence might be that you see a product you're not interested in. If a pharmacovigilance algorithm makes a mistake, it could mean missing a critical safety signal. Or worse, over-reporting false positives that overwhelm systems and erode confidence.
Exactly. That's why regulators like the FDA and EMA are walking a fine line. They're encouraging the adoption of advanced analytics, but they're also issuing guidance that stresses the need for explainability, validation, and human oversight. Automation can't replace trained safety scientists, it has to augment them.
And that's an important point. AI and pharmacovigilance is not about taking humans out of the loop. It's about giving them better tools. Imagine a safety team that no longer spends hours manually entering adverse event reports into databases, but instead can focus on interpreting the most complex cases, understanding context, and making nuanced regulatory decisions. That's the real promise here: shifting the human effort from repetitive data entry to higher level judgment.
And implementation is easier said than done. One challenge is data quality. Adverse event reports are often incomplete, inconsistent, or ambiguous. An algorithm is only as good as the data it's trained on, so companies need to invest heavily in cleaning and standardizing safety data sets before AI tools can be trusted.
Another challenge is bias. If your training data underrepresents certain patient groups, whether by age, gender, ethnicity, or geography, then your algorithm may fail to detect safety signals in those populations. That's not just a technical flaw, it's an ethical issue. The last thing you want is for AI to widen existing health disparities.
And then there's the global regulatory landscape. Different regions have different expectations for pharmacovigilance reporting. The EMA has vigilance, the FDA has FAERS, Japan has JADER, and each system has its own data structures, reporting standards, and review processes. For multinational companies, implementing AI means ensuring it can adapt to multiple frameworks and still deliver consistent and reliable results.
There's also the challenge of validation. Regulators will want to see that an AI system works not just in theory, but in practice. That means demonstrating performance across diverse data sets, documenting every decision rule, and running side-by-side comparisons with human review processes until confidence is established.
What's encouraging is that early pilots have shown real promise. Companies using natural language processing for case intake, for example, report significant reductions in manual processing time without compromising accuracy. Others are using machine learning models to prioritize cases for human review, ensuring that the highest risk reports are analyzed first. These are small steps, but they show how AI can be applied responsibly, incrementally, and with human oversight at every stage.
And perhaps the most important takeaway, trust has to be earned. Patients need to believe that their safety data is being handled carefully. Regulators need to see that AI outputs are explainable and reliable. And companies need to build internal cultures where pharmacovigilance is seen not just as a compliance requirement, but as a strategic priority that directly impacts reputation and market access.
So, as we dive into this topic, the key question isn't whether AI can be applied to pharmacovigilance, it already is. The real question is, how do we apply it in a way that accelerates safety without compromising transparency or trust?
One of the best ways to understand how AI is reshaping pharmacovigilance is by looking at case examples. Several large pharma companies have already piloted AI tools for case intake, the first step in safety reporting. Normally, when an adverse event comes in, whether from a physician, a call center, or a patient, staff need to read through the report, extract key details, and enter them into a database. It's slow, repetitive, and prone to human error.
By applying natural language processing, some companies have been able to automatically capture the relevant details, patient demographics, drug name, dosage, adverse event description, and pre populate fields in their safety databases. Instead of spending 20 minutes processing a single report, safety teams now spend 2 or 3 minutes reviewing the AI's output and confirming accuracy. That shift doesn't just save time, it frees scientists to focus on higher value tasks.
And we're not just talking about efficiency. Early studies show that AI assisted intake can actually reduce errors. Human fatigue is real, especially when reviewing hundreds of cases in a shift. An algorithm, on the other hand, doesn't get tired. If trained properly, it applies the same rules consistently every time.
Another application is signal detection. Traditionally, safety scientists comb through large data sets, vigilance in Europe, FAERs in the US, looking for patterns that suggest a drug may be causing harm. But these databases hold millions of records. Manual review can miss weak but important signals. AI, particularly machine learning, excels at spotting subtle correlations across large data sets, helping to prioritize which signals deserve deeper investigation.
Of course, that's where human oversight comes back in. An algorithm might detect that reports of liver toxicity are slightly higher in patients taking a certain drug, but it can't tell you whether that's a true signal or just noise from confounding variables. Humans need to step in, contextualize, and make the judgment call.
Globally, regulators are paying close attention to these pilots. The EMA, for example, has openly discussed the potential of AI for pharmacovigilance, but has emphasized that companies must demonstrate reliability and validation. In fact, they've encouraged early scientific advice meetings specifically on the use of AI in safety systems. The FDA has taken a similar stance, supportive of innovation, but very clear that the ultimate responsibility for safety monitoring remains with the sponsor, not the algorithm.
Japan's PMDA and Health Canada are also watching this space, though at slightly different speeds. Japan tends to be cautious, requiring detailed validation before approving new processes. While Canada has been open to pilots but stresses transparency, the takeaway is clear. Regulators are aligned on the potential, but they won't accept black box models. Transparency is non negotiable.
Another interesting trend is the rise of hybrid models, where AI doesn't replace, but triages. For example, instead of reviewing every single adverse event report in depth, companies use AI to prioritize which reports are most urgent. A case that looks like it involves a serious, unexpected reaction might be flagged for immediate human review, while a routine, well documented reaction might be reviewed later or sampled. That kind of smart triage can help companies stay ahead of their regulatory timelines, especially when case volumes spike.
And volumes are spiking. With the growth of social media and direct patient reporting, the number of adverse event reports has skyrocketed. Every tweet, Facebook post, or blog that mentions a potential side effect could technically be considered a safety report if linked to a marketed product. No human team could ever monitor all of that manually. AI, however, can scan these sources continuously, flagging potential issues for human review.
This raises another critical point: false positives. If an algorithm is too sensitive, it could overwhelm safety teams with noise, flagging hundreds of reports that turn out to be irrelevant. That creates inefficiency and risks distracting teams from real issues. The balance between sensitivity and specificity, catching real problems without drowning in noise, is one of the hardest challenges in pharmacovigilance AI.
And then there's the issue of trust from patients and providers. Imagine being a physician reporting an adverse event and learning that it's being processed by AI. That could raise concerns about whether the case will be taken seriously. For patients, trust in safety systems is fundamental. That's why transparency is key. Companies need to communicate that AI is a tool, not a replacement for expert review.
Looking ahead, we're starting to see collaborations emerge between pharma regulators and technology companies to build best practices for AI and pharmacovigilance. Groups like ICH and CIOMS are beginning discussions on harmonization because without global alignment, companies risk building different systems for each regulator, which undermines efficiency.
So, as we move further into this conversation, the big questions become: how do we validate these tools in a way regulators accept? How do we ensure transparency without drowning stakeholders in technical detail? And how do we make sure that patients and providers feel confident their safety is still the highest priority in an AI-driven world?
One of the most exciting frontiers in AI driven pharmacovigilance is predictive safety monitoring. Traditionally, pharmacovigilance has been reactive, waiting for reports of adverse events, then investigating them. But with AI, especially when combined with big data from electronic health records, claims databases, and even genomics, we may be able to identify risks before they manifest on a large scale. Imagine detecting a subtle pattern of side effects during early prescribing, then alerting regulators and physicians before it becomes widespread. That's the future vision: proactive, not just reactive safety.
Another concept gaining traction is the use of digital twins in safety monitoring. In manufacturing or clinical trials, digital twins, virtual models that simulate real-world systems, are already being piloted. Applied to pharmacovigilance, the idea would be to simulate how a drug behaves in different patient populations by combining real-world data with AI-driven modeling. For example, you could predict how a therapy might interact in older populations with multiple comorbidities, patients often excluded from trials, but highly relevant in real-world use.
There's also the opportunity to integrate AI with post market surveillance systems in real time. Right now, most safety databases rely on periodic uploads and batch analysis. AI could allow continuous monitoring of adverse events across multiple streams: EHRs, pharmacy systems, social media, wearable devices. Think of it as moving from static safety snapshots to a living, breathing safety radar that never sleeps.
Of course, all of this hinges on data interoperability. If the information coming in is fragmented, inconsistent, or siloed, the AI's predictions will be unreliable. That's why there's such a push for standards like HL7 FHIR. Without standardized data pipelines, the most advanced algorithms in the world won't be able to generate trustworthy evidence.
Now, let's talk about the human side again. Because one misconception about AI is that it will eventually replace safety scientists. In reality, the more AI advances, the more valuable human judgment becomes. AI can flag patterns, but it can't weigh cultural, ethical, or contextual factors. For instance, if an algorithm flags a spike in adverse events in one country, is that a true safety signal or a result of heightened local awareness campaigns? Only human experts with their contextual knowledge can make that call.
Another layer to this is regulatory strategy. Companies that treat AI as just an operational tool may miss the bigger picture. Regulators are increasingly interested in how sponsors validate, monitor, and govern their AI models. That means pharmacovigilance teams need to work hand in hand with regulatory affairs, IT, and compliance to build robust governance frameworks. It's not just about the algorithm, it's about how the algorithm is managed, documented, and continuously improved.
Globally, we are already seeing differences in how this plays out. The US FDA has published draft guidance on AI/ML in medical devices, and while it doesn't directly apply to pharmacovigilance, the principles of transparency, validation, and continuous monitoring carry over. The EMA has echoed similar concerns, highlighting the need for explainable AI. Meanwhile, China's NMPA has been aggressive in piloting AI use cases, but requires sponsors to provide extensive local validation data. For multinational companies, this creates a complex regulatory landscape, one where AI governance itself becomes a competitive differentiator.
And here's something we haven't touched on yet: ethics and bias in AI driven safety. Just as with AI in healthcare delivery, pharmacovigilance algorithms can inherit biases from the datasets they're trained on. If the training data underrepresents certain populations, say minority groups or low and middle income countries, then the AI may fail to flag safety risks in those groups. That's a huge ethical concern, and regulators are beginning to demand transparency on how datasets are selected and balanced.
Finally, let's zoom out to the big picture. The goal of pharmacovigilance has always been the same: protect patients while enabling innovation. AI doesn't change that mission, but it does change how we get there. If implemented well, AI can make pharmacovigilance faster, more accurate, and more proactive. But if implemented poorly, without transparency, governance, or patient trust, it risks undermining the very system it's meant to enhance.
So, as we move into the final stretch of this conversation, we'll explore what companies need to do now to prepare for this AI enabled future: governance frameworks, workforce training, cross functional collaboration, and early regulator engagement. Because the future of safety isn't just about algorithms. It's about building a system where humans and AI work together to ensure patients are protected at every step.
When we think about bringing AI into pharmacovigilance, one of the most overlooked pieces is change management. Technology alone doesn't transform a safety system, it's how people inside the organization use it. We've seen cases where companies invested millions into AI driven case intake platforms, only to find their safety teams bypassing the tool because they didn't trust the outputs. That highlights a bigger truth. Adoption depends just as much on culture as it does on code.
So, what does building the right culture look like? First, it means treating AI as a partner, not a black box. Organizations should make sure safety scientists understand not just what the algorithm says, but how it got there. Training staff to interpret AI outputs, challenge them when necessary, and escalate anomalies creates a feedback loop that improves both the model and the humans who rely on it.
Second, it requires cross functional collaboration. AI in pharmacovigilance touches regulatory, clinical, IT, legal, and even commercial functions. If those groups work in silos, the AI system will never reach its potential. Instead, companies need integrated governance committees that review new tools, validate models, and decide how outputs should inform regulatory reporting or internal safety signals.
There's also the matter of workforce evolution. A decade ago, the core pharmacovigilance skill set was heavily manual: narrative review, med-DRA coding, case triage. Now we're seeing demand for data scientists, machine learning engineers, and professionals who can blend pharmacology knowledge with advanced analytics. That doesn't mean traditional safety scientists become obsolete. It means their roles shift toward higher value work, validating signals, providing clinical interpretation, and engaging with regulators on complex cases.
One fascinating development here is the rise of hybrid roles. We're starting to see safety experts trained in machine learning or data scientists embedded directly in pharmacovigilance units. That interdisciplinary expertise is becoming a real differentiator. In fact, some companies have started developing internal AI and safety academies, training their own staff in both domains to reduce dependency on external vendors.
Let's also talk about global harmonization, because AI in pharmacovigilance doesn't stop at national borders. Right now, each regulator has its own expectations for safety reporting. If one agency accepts AI-driven case processing, but another insists on traditional methods, companies face duplicated effort. That's why groups like ICH are beginning to explore shared frameworks for how AI can be validated in safety monitoring. If harmonization advances, it could unlock massive efficiencies across global operations.
Another point worth highlighting is continuous monitoring and lifecycle management. AI models don't stay accurate forever. As drugs enter new markets, patient demographics shift, or social media patterns evolve, the inputs feeding these systems change. That creates model drift, where an algorithm that once performed well starts to miss signals or overflag noise. Companies need systems to monitor AI performance continuously, retrain models with new data, and document every update for regulators. Without that lifecycle approach, trust will erode quickly.
We also need to consider patient engagement. Increasingly, patients themselves are part of the pharmacovigilance ecosystem, whether through mobile apps, wearable devices, or social listening platforms. If patients know AI is monitoring their data, companies must be transparent about how it's used and how privacy is protected. Otherwise, the very people these systems are meant to protect may feel alienated or exploited.
And here's where things get really interesting: the potential for AI driven personalization in safety monitoring. Instead of applying the same safety thresholds across the board, imagine a system that adjusts risk detection based on a patient's age, genetics, comorbidities, or even lifestyle. That's still in the experimental stage, but the idea is compelling. Safety signals that aren't just population wide, but tailored to individuals. Of course, that raises new ethical and regulatory questions, but it shows just how transformative this technology could become.
Ultimately, the story of AI in pharmacovigilance isn't about replacing humans. It's about reshaping the safety ecosystem so that both humans and machines operate at their best. Machines can handle scale, speed, and pattern recognition. Humans bring judgment, empathy, and context. The organizations that strike the right balance between the two will not only meet regulatory expectations, but also earn the trust of patients, providers, and society at large.
As we bring today's deep dive to a close, let's step back and remember the bigger picture. Pharmacovigilance has always been about one thing: protecting patients. The tools may evolve, the data streams may grow, but the mission remains the same, like making sure medicines are not just effective, but safe.
AI is giving us an incredible opportunity to strengthen that mission. Faster case processing, more accurate signal detection, earlier risk identification. These are breakthroughs that could fundamentally reshape how we safeguard public health. But the success of AI doesn't depend only on algorithms. It depends on trust. Trust that the systems are accurate, that the data is protected, and that the people behind the technology remain accountable.
And that's the balance the industry must strike. Automating safety doesn't mean surrendering human judgment. It means letting machines do what they do best: scale, speed, and pattern recognition, while humans bring the clinical insight, ethical perspective, and regulatory expertise that machines cannot replicate. Together, that partnership has the potential to make pharmacovigilance stronger than ever.
The other piece to remember is readiness. Regulators are moving quickly to shape expectations, and payers, patients, and providers are watching closely. Organizations that wait on the sidelines risk being left behind. Those who act now, investing in validation, governance, and workforce upskilling, will be the ones who define best practices instead of scrambling to catch up.
At Emma International, this is where we step in. We help life science companies not just implement AI, but implement it responsibly. That means building compliance into every process, aligning with regulators early, and ensuring that technology strengthens, not replaces, the mission of patient safety.
So, if your organization is exploring AI and pharmacovigilance and wondering how to strike that balance between innovation and trust, now is the time to act. You can connect with us anytime at info@emmainternational.com or visit emmainternational.com to learn more about how we can support your journey.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll continue to bring you conversations that matter most in life sciences, from regulatory shifts to emerging technologies. Until next time, stay safe, stay compliant, and stay innovative.